Prime Minister Mark Carney has a lot on his plate. He told Canadians he'd lead the country in a totally different way than the last Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Carney promised to undo many things the Liberals did, like the carbon tax, which makes things more expensive for people, and letting in so many immigrants. People really liked these promises, and it helped him almost win enough votes to form a majority government, even though it looked like his party was going to lose badly. But these promises also left the government with some tough money problems. Now, Prime Minister Carney never said he would do this, but I think he should quietly get rid of the firearm ban and the program to buy back guns. It's a bad idea, and could cost a ton of money without really making us safer or stopping crime. A woman named Marcia Jones, who works for the government department that deals with public safety, spoke to a group of senators. She said they think it will cost about $342.6 million to buy back these guns. But get this, she admitted those numbers were just guesses. They were based on old information from a gun registry that was stopped way back in 2012. Senator Claude Carignan was pretty worried about this because the information from that old registry was supposed to be destroyed in 2012. So he asked, how are they even getting these numbers now? That's a good question. Not only is it weird that they still have this old information, but we also have to wonder if it's even correct. The old gun registry, which was started in 1995, was a total disaster from the start. It was supposed to cost only $2 million, but it ended up costing more than 1,000 times that, over $2.7 billion, before it was finally stopped. Even the police, the RCMP, found that the gun registry was wrong a lot of the time. They said that between 45% and 90% of the information about guns and gun owners was wrong. Someone even found out that 4,438 stolen guns were re-registered without anyone knowing they were stolen. So even if the government still has this old information, it's pretty useless for figuring out where guns are today. They'd have to start all over again to find out who owns the guns they want to ban now. Did you know that Canada has a lot of guns among its people? We're actually the 7th most armed country in the world. It's estimated that 1 out of every 4 Canadian homes has a gun. But even with millions of guns, we don't have many mass shootings or crimes caused by guns that are owned legally. The problems with gun crime in America are more about their social and cultural issues, not just the guns themselves. Countries like Finland and Iceland have about the same number of guns per person as Canada, and they have very low crime rates. Banning assault-style guns in Canada seems like they're trying to fix something that isn't really broken. It was a quick reaction to the terrible shooting that happened in Nova Scotia in 2020. But the person who did those crimes, Gabriel Wortman, used guns he had stolen and brought into the country illegally. So if these new gun bans had been in place back then, they wouldn't have stopped him at all. Toronto has been seeing a lot more violent crimes with guns. Police have said that as many as 88% of the guns used in those crimes were smuggled into Canada from the United States. Police chiefs have also said that banning handguns doesn't stop gun violence. It seems like the people who are actually dealing with crime every day are trying to tell the government what's needed, but no one is listening. The Liberals have been focused on targeting legal gun owners for a long time, and they just won't change their minds. Think about how many police officers will be busy trying to find and take guns from people who don't follow the bans. Will the cost to buy back guns from people who do follow the rules really only be in the hundreds of millions? How big will the government's offices get as they try to manage a program that affects a quarter of all homes in the country? People have been really worried about crime getting worse, and this even came up during the last election. The Liberals said they would get tougher on things like bail reform and car thefts, but they weren't very clear about how. Prime Minister Carney's government has a chance to be smart about fighting violent crime, while also saving money and government resources. By dropping the gun bans and the gun buyback plan, the government could free up police officers and court resources to deal with more serious crimes. If they put money into things like better border control, more police, and help for mental health issues, that would really make a difference in stopping violent crime. It would mean changing from rules based on old ideas to rules based on what actually works, but it would be good for both the government and for everyone in Canada. With so many other important things the government is working on right now, if they quietly got rid of the gun bans, most people probably wouldn't even notice. Prime Minister Carney's ambitious plans come with a significant price tag and create new financial challenges for the country. Repealing the carbon tax, for example, means the government must find another source of revenue or cut spending to make up for the loss. Similarly, while reducing immigration might address certain public concerns, it could also slow down economic growth in the long run. At the same time, the government faces pressure to increase spending in other critical areas such as national defense. These competing demands put the new administration in a difficult fiscal position right from the start. The government has already made it clear that it will not raise taxes to pay for its priorities, including higher defense spending. This decision forces the administration to look for savings elsewhere in the federal budget. Every dollar must be carefully examined to ensure it is being spent wisely. This is where programs inherited from the previous government come under intense scrutiny. The Carney government must decide which initiatives are worth continuing and which ones are a drain on public funds without delivering real results. These are not easy choices, but they are necessary to keep the nation's finances in order. One of the most expensive and controversial programs on the books is the firearm ban and buyback plan initiated by the Trudeau government. This program was introduced as a response to the tragic 2020 mass shooting in Nova Scotia. It aimed to ban over 1,500 models of so-called assault-style firearms and compensate legal owners for turning them in. However, the program's costs have been a point of major concern from the very beginning. Public safety officials have estimated that simply buying back the firearms will cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, a figure that many believe is far too low. This financial pressure forces the new government to weigh the costs against the benefits of every single program. An expensive initiative like the gun buyback must prove that it is the most effective way to improve public safety. If it costs a fortune but does little to stop actual crime, then those resources could be better used elsewhere. For a government focused on fiscal responsibility and practical results, continuing a costly program with questionable effectiveness becomes very difficult to justify. The search for savings will inevitably lead officials to question the wisdom of the gun ban. Given the new government's focus on the economy and cutting unnecessary spending, the firearm ban and buyback program is a logical target for review. While Prime Minister Carney never made it a central campaign promise, quietly ending the program would align perfectly with his administration's goals. Scrapping the plan would free up a significant amount of money and government resources. This would be a smart political move, allowing the government to show it is serious about fiscal discipline, without getting bogged down in a loud, divisive culture war debate over gun control that could distract from its main economic agenda. The logic behind the original ban is also worth examining closely. The policy was a direct reaction to the horrific events in Nova Scotia in 2020. However, the facts of that case show that the perpetrator used firearms that were obtained illegally and smuggled into the country. This means that a ban on legally owned firearms would not have stopped him or prevented the tragedy. This critical detail undermines the entire premise of the ban. It targets law-abiding citizens and their property, even though they were not the source of the problem in the very incident that inspired the policy. Police resources are another major factor in this debate. Implementing a nationwide buyback program would require a massive amount of police time and administrative effort. Officers would be tasked with collecting, cataloging, and destroying hundreds of thousands of firearms from legal owners across the country. Many police leaders have questioned whether this is a good use of their limited resources. They argue that their time would be better spent focusing on the real drivers of gun violence, such as organized crime and the smuggling of illegal weapons across the border, rather than managing a complex logistical program. Therefore, a quiet reversal of the ban makes practical sense from multiple angles. It would save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, allowing that money to be redirected to more effective crime prevention strategies. It would free up police to concentrate on genuine threats to public safety. Finally, it would address a policy that was based on a flawed premise from the start. For a government that wants to be seen as pragmatic and results-oriented, moving away from the firearm buyback program seems not just possible, but also a responsible and logical decision for the country. The official cost estimate for the gun buyback program is, honestly, highly questionable. Public safety officials told senators that the program would cost around $342.6 million. But this figure was immediately met with skepticism. The reason for the doubt really lies in the source of the data used to create the estimate. The government relied on information from the federal long gun registry, which, by the way, was so controversial and flawed that Parliament voted to abolish it and destroy its records way back in 2012. Using data from a defunct and notoriously inaccurate registry raises some serious questions about the true cost of the buyback. The history of the long gun registry, frankly, is a lesson in government waste. Originally, it was projected to cost just $2 million, but its final price tag ballooned to over $2.7 billion by the time it was shut down. The system was plagued with problems right from the very beginning. Audits conducted by the RCMP revealed that the data in the registry was shockingly inaccurate, with error rates ranging from 45% to as high as 90% in some cases. An investigation even found that 4,438 firearms that had been reported as stolen were somehow re-registered in the system without any red flags being raised. Because the old registry data is so unreliable, the government can't just use it to identify all the firearms and owners affected by the ban. Officials would likely have to start from scratch, building a whole new system to track down every single firearm that now falls under the prohibition. This would involve a massive and costly effort, likely pushing the final cost of the buyback far beyond the initial estimate. The $342.6 million figure is almost certainly a lowball number that fails to account for the immense administrative and logistical challenges of implementing the program with no reliable data to work from. This situation honestly puts the government in an impossible position. It's being asked to spend a huge amount of public money on a program whose true cost is unknown, based on data from a system that was a proven failure. Senators like Claude Carignan have rightly questioned how officials could even produce an estimate using data that was supposed to have been destroyed years ago. This lack of clear and reliable information makes it pretty much impossible to justify the expense. Continuing with the buyback would mean throwing good money after bad, just repeating the costly mistakes of the past. A crucial fact is often lost in the debate over gun control in Canada. Legal gun owners are not the primary source of gun crime. While Canada is the world's 7th most armed country, with firearms present in an estimated 1 in 4 homes, it actually has very low rates of mass shootings and violent crime committed with legally owned guns. The vast majority of Canadian firearm owners are law-abiding citizens who follow strict regulations for licensing and storage. The data just doesn't support the idea that targeting this group will have a meaningful impact on public safety. Police officials across the country have repeatedly stated that the main problem isn't legal firearms, but illegal ones smuggled into the country. The Toronto Police Service, for example, reports that as many as 88% of the guns used in crimes in the city are traced back to the United States. These weapons are brought into Canada by criminal organizations and are completely untraceable within our legal system. This is the real source of the guns that are ending up on our streets and being used in violent acts. Banning certain types of rifles from legal owners does nothing to stop this illegal flow. Many police chiefs have publicly expressed doubts about the effectiveness of banning firearms from licensed owners. They understand that criminals do not follow gun laws. A ban on assault-style weapons or even handguns will not deter someone who is already willing to break the law to acquire and use a weapon for criminal purposes. They argue that police efforts are much better focused on strengthening border security to stop smuggling, targeting gangs and organized crime, and investing in community programs that address the root causes of violence, such as poverty and lack of opportunity. Ultimately, the government has to decide how to best use its limited resources to protect Canadians. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars and countless hours of police time to confiscate firearms from licensed citizens is honestly an inefficient strategy that misdiagnoses the problem. The evidence clearly shows that the threat comes from the illegal gun trade. A smarter approach would be to invest in border control, intelligence sharing with U.S. law enforcement, and programs that provide mental health support and alternatives to crime. It's time to focus on real solutions that address the true sources of gun violence, not on policies that punish law-abiding people.